Yeah.
I'm not Annika. I'm 7. The aunt keeps calling her Annika, just refuses to accept the new name. She keeps dead naming her. That is because another important aspect of Firewall is that it's also an allegory for trans identity.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you guys have gotten to the end of the book yet, the action climax. If so, I don't want to spoil. Let's just say there is a moment that is meant to be sort of one of those fist pump in the air, yeah, moments when she essentially gets to tell somebody off about, don't ever tell me I don't know my own name. And that's basically for every trans person who's ever been dead named and just had to swallow it.
Mm.
And so that's great. And I think that lines up with the TV show, right? Picard, like how she handles in season 3, how she, Shaw's, how he uses her name, and then, how that's a big thread there. I am curious though about, in your acknowledgement, so I skipped ahead to the acknowledgements you dedicated to the LGBTQIA plus community, your take on her relationship development, how you developed it further in the book than where it was from Voyager. The show in seasons 1 and 2 had this relationship with Rafi in season 2, and then season 3, some people have complained that it was just kind of ignored or left to the wayside, barely mentioned or barely hinted at. I'm curious if that bumped.
I mean, I can't speak to what the producers.
Of course not.
I wasn't in the room, but if I had to guess, having watched Picard season 3, you've only got so many minutes.
Yeah, there's no time. There was no time for it. Yeah,
and they were concentrating on a very plot-driven, high velocity, very fast-paced narrative, and I just don't think that there was a lot of time or a lot of downtime in the plot they had built to sort of allow those sort of slower, more personal moments between Seven and Rafi. But I think also what we're supposed to take away, my guess, this is what I took away from it, is that Seven and Rafi were a couple. It didn't work out. There was some awkwardness for a while, but what we take from Picard season 3 is they've moved past the awkwardness of the breakup so that they can still be friends. Maybe there's a chance that something could redevelop someday, but right now they're not a romantic item. They are people who were briefly together, but relationships end for all kinds of reasons, and they don't always have to be cataclysmic. And it could just be that they dated and it didn't work out, and there was some anger and some bitterness, some residual, some lingering, animosity about it, but they got over it.
I think that's reasonable to me. I think, who knows? Yeah, we'll ask Terry Metalis one day. But I think sometimes sometimes the fans get a little worked up over it or not. But that was my segue to, do fans bother you? Because I was on your webpage and I love your FAQ, and your FAQ is question: can you help me get an agent? Answer: no. Will you help me get my Star Trek novel published? Answer: no. Would you be willing to collaborate with me? No. Are you sure you won't help me? No. I'm positive. And so on. So I guess my question is sort of, the fans, how do you feel?
Well, first of all, that FAQ, that draft of it was written almost 15 years ago when I redesigned the website. Back then, I got a lot more of it than I do now. Some of the things that I would add stuff to the bottom. The more recent things I get in my feedback queue are basically fans who are only just now or in the last few years have discovered my 4400 novel, for which I was specifically hired with the remit of, well, the show isn't coming back. We don't know what they were going to do for a finale. So they hired me and Greg Cox to write a 2-part story, him writing part 1 and me writing the conclusion. They said, imagine what you would do for the finale of the 4400 if you got to write it. And so I took the mythology of the 4400 and I wrote it. And then at the end, I turned in my manuscript and the editor said, well, we don't know if this book sells. If these do really well, we might
more.
Continue the thing. So could you add a tag? Could you add a scene here that would enable us to spin off and keep going with more books? I said, doesn't that dilute the impact of the ending of the book? And they said, yes, but at least it leaves a door open if we need to. And I was thinking, well, we could always put that
more money
at the beginning of another book in the future. But sure, if you really want me to, I'll do that. So I did it. And then, of course, it confused the living daylights out of all the poor 4400 fans who got to the end of what should have been the conclusive ending of the story. And then they get this tag scene that implies there's more. And they go, so what happens next? Where's the next book?
Yeah.
And I go, well, these books didn't sell. They didn't commission them. There are no more. Well, what am I supposed to do now? I say, rip out the last few pages of the book and just pretend you never read them.
Yeah.
That's my best offer. I don't know what to do. I can't help you. Tear those pages out and just pretend you didn't read them.
I gotta imagine there's frustration all the time with,
I get some questions that are very reasonable, and then I get some where, recently some fan contacted me with questions about characters. Like, I'd written some mirror universe novels, so they were curious about, well, what would this character have been doing? And, this character was established here, and what happened? Why didn't this character appear in the mirror universe? And what happened to this one? And what about him? And what would have been his fate? And I'm like, in some cases, I'm like, well, I made the assumption of this based on this. And then as it gets more and more granular going down, I'm like, I just suddenly resorted to answers. Don't know, don't care. Don't know, don't care. Don't know, don't care. And then they sent like the entire, they must have copied and pasted from like Memory Alpha or Memory Beta, one of the wiki sites about Star Trek, the entire crew manifest that's known to have been in the books on the ISS Enterprise, the original over the years of the 23rd century. They said, is this the correct manifest? I'm like, how the hell would I know? That's a lot of names and a lot of dates. What am I, your historical researcher? Am I your Google? This is not my job. Figure this out for yourself.
Why figure it out?
So at that point, I started getting a little testy. I'm like, this is starting to turn into a colossal waste of my time. Yeah. And at some point, I just had to say, all right, enough.
No response.
Go away.
Yeah.
I did expect any pushback on this specific novel regarding, the support for sexuality. I read an article yesterday in IndieWire about how it's the 20th anniversary of that show, The L Word, and how this 20th anniversary is being celebrated during a time where there is, well, I mean, it's an op-ed, but what this writer believes is the least amount of support for queer women and people that identify as women in particular. Do you expect any pushback from the fan
really
base?
I mean, again, I'll be surprised if anybody even notices, to be frank. I mean, it's a Star Trek novel. How much cultural impact is it really likely to have? I would like for it to have cultural impact.
Sure.
I would love people to notice. I would love to have this book get banned in multiple states across the Sun Belt. I would love to have Florida and Texas declare me a threat to the American family. Go ahead, boost my sales. I dare you. Please order in bulk. Feel free to burn them. I don't care if you burn them as long as you pay for them first.
Oh my God! I never thought I'd get David Mack to say burn my books.
Go ahead, burn them. They'll print more. Just pay for them first. I don't care what you do with it once you pay for it. It's not my problem. I don't even care if you read it once you pay for it.
Yeah,
just pay for it. Then do what you want.
I think,
no, I mean, I think you're right though. You're right to point out that this is a difficult and dangerous time to be a woman, queer or otherwise, cis or otherwise. Civil rights are being rolled back and trampled in multiple states across the United States. And for some reason that I just, actually, I would say I can't comprehend, except I unfortunately comprehend all too well. The trans community is being particularly targeted with just unbelievably stupid, punitive laws and harsh treatment, not because they pose any genuine threat to the stability of American life or whatever, but because they are so small a community. They are therefore vulnerable. And it's always easy to pick on the vulnerable. It's always easy to scapegoat the vulnerable. And I think that's, one of the things that upsets me most is seeing bullying elevated to the political arena, bullying elevated to the legislative scale of things. When bullying gets to the point where we're now actively legislating, making people's very existence potentially a felony, to make it just to exist as you honestly are, that's the point where I just have to say, screw you, I'm going to fight you on this one. Because now you're messing with my colleagues, you're messing with members of my family, you're messing with my friends.
The lack of
that's war. That's war.
The lack of empathy is shocking.
Exactly.
How it grows tremendously.
What have you personally seen in terms of the people you know, the people you work with, the people that you're related to? How have you seen it affect them, this wave of lack of empathy or even weaponizing empathy?
I would agree with that characterization. I'm fortunate, and many of those I'm close to are fortunate in that we live in what are considered blue states or safe states, places like New York, Massachusetts, California. Mm-hmm. But even in places like that, there is still a rising sense of anxiety, paranoia, a sense that, what if this breaks free of these sort of clusters in certain states, and what if it goes national? What if this kind of hate seizes power on a national level? There's a definite, palpable sense of overnight, because these folks are so visible and vulnerable at the same time. It would be very easy for hateful folks to round them up and put them in camps. I mean, even from blue states, like if this sort of hate takes over at the national level, all bets are off. Nobody's safe. And so there is definitely a sense of, I would say there's definitely a sense of fear. There's a sense of anxiety that rights that, people have struggled to obtain over the course of decades are being wiped away with frightening speed. And there's a sense that there's an urgency now that I don't think has been felt in a long time, that something has to be done to push back and reclaim those rights and defend those rights from further infringement. And that was, again, part of the emotional underpinning for me as I wrote Firewall, was thinking about Seven as this character who is going out for the first time by leaving behind her Voyager family, who have now scattered when they first come home. She finds herself, all alone. All she's really got is Janeway. But at some point, we all have to break away from our parents. And in many ways, Janeway represents a mother figure to Seven. She's the mother figure that takes the place of her real mom and then supplants the Borg queen. But at some point, we all have to break away. We have to make our own identity. We have to define our own place in the world in the world in which we live. And Seven has to do that. And so she goes out, and what she sees, is not the bright, shiny Federation. She's trying to get as far from that. She's going after the fringes of that and then beyond it. And what she's finding is not every place in the universe is fair. They're not all equitable, that there are places that are still mired by economic injustice, social injustice. There are places that are filthy and poorly maintained. There are places where atrocities still occur, where the rule of law has failed. And she's seeing what happens when the rule of law fails, what the consequences are for the powerless, what the consequences are for the disenfranchised. And that's what awakens in her. Around the middle of the book, she has essentially the great emotional awakening that the Voyager characters had been trying to steer her toward for years. They've been trying to awaken and foster within Seven her sense of human empathy, her sense of human connection, her ability to empathize with other sentient beings, to feel their pain and to appreciate their reality as much as her own. And it's a difficult thing getting this former Borg drone to rediscover this aspect of herself. And then when it finally hits in the middle of Firewall, when somebody is showing her this scene of atrocity, which, if you read the details and you know anything about World War II history, you'll realize is based in part on a real place called Babi Yar, which is a ravine outside Kiev in the Ukraine, where in the early period of World War II in the 30s, the Nazis rounded up all the Jews of Kiev, about 60 to 80,000 of them, and they marched them out to this ravine, and they executed them en masse over the course of days. And they filled this ravine with bodies and then just left them there. And so it's one of the most horrific mass murders in World War II history, in world history. If you read the accounts of some people who were lucky enough to survive, who were hit by bullets but were not killed, and then just basically laid under the pile of bodies, some of them for days before they were able to